Hello, everyone.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. Hello to
Good.
everyone who's tuned in to our webinar. Thank you for tuning in to our Sable International Study in Australia webinar. There's quite a few people who have joined us. There's probably a lot more who are about to join us. But we'll get started anyway. I can see a few more people joining now.
Yeah, trickling in.
Um, My name's Sam, and this is my colleague Amy, and this is our agenda today. So we're quickly going to run you through what it is that we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about why you might want to come and study in Australia. I hope that's what you're here to hear about, because that's what we're talking about. I'm going to talk specifically about why you might want to study in Australia, and then if you might want to stay permanently after you've finished your studies. We're going to touch on a few different visa types. Specifically, we're going to talk about the 485 post-study work visa, what I like to refer to as the stepping stone visa. And we're going to talk about how you might then become a permanent resident. We'll do some case studies, and we'll also take some Q&A. Before we get further into it, well, to begin with, we better do an introduction so everyone knows who they're talking to. So Sable International, who are we? We're a group of different businesses. We've been around for over 20 years. The business first started in London, I think about 23 years ago. I first started working with the business in London 17 years ago. I've been working in immigration for that period of time. I'm a registered migration agent. My name's Sam Hopwood. I'm also the managing director of Sable International Australia. I'm based in our Melbourne office, coming to you from Melbourne at this point in time. And Sable, as a business, we provide lots of different services to our clients around the world. Specifically, we focus on finding people immigration solutions to different countries. And that's what we're going to be talking about today, partly, is immigration solutions to Australia. Amy, do you want to introduce yourself and tell the people how it is that you can help them immigrate to a new country?
Okay, so my name's Amy. I work for the Study Abroad department. So we place students at international universities. We're partnered with over 250 universities worldwide, but obviously for today we'll be focusing on Australia. But essentially what we do is we assist in choosing the best country and university that is suited to your field of study. So you will need to know what you want to study before you come to us. We assist with university applications. If you do get an offer, we assist with your student visa application, and we assist with on-campus accommodation. So we pretty much help you with everything to ensure that you're at your desired destination safe and sound.
Excellent. Thanks, Amy. I like to provide a bit of interaction throughout the webinar, so I'm happy to field questions at any point in time. If people have questions that are related to Australian immigration, then I'm happy to field questions. As long as the questions are generalistic, then I'm happy to field those questions. And if you can put your questions in the chat box, then only Amy and I can see your questions. No one else can see your questions. To begin with, maybe we'll just get a show of hands. If people could type in the chat box whereabouts they are in the world today, whereabouts you might be in South Africa or elsewhere in Africa. So let us know what city you're in. Amy's in Cape Town, by the way. I'm in
Yes,
Melbourne.
I can see some South Africa, Cape Town, Pietermaritzburg, Somalia. Okay, Nigeria, Limpopo. So we've got a nice Gauteng. Okay, perfect. So we got a lot of Safas here today.
We do. We've got a lot of South Africans in the room. Adelaide, Australia. Woohoo.
Oh, here we
Okay.
go.
Fantastic. Glad to see someone from Australia tuning in. Personally, I've spent a lot of time in South Africa. I've been traveling there for over 15 years. I'm normally there 2 or 3 times a year. I've been there since COVID. I hope to get back there soon. I'm often in South Africa in our Cape Town office or traveling to different cities around South Africa. So hopefully I'll get back there soon and be able to see you in lovely sunny South Africa. All right, so we better move on. But yeah, feel free to jump in the chat box and ask questions as we go. Hopefully I'll be able to answer them. So why study in Australia? Good question. So these are just some ideas that I came up with, and these might be relevant to you, and you might agree or disagree. And again, feel free to jump in the chat box and let me know what you think. But why would you study in Australia? To get a good education. Apparently, our universities are very well respected around the world. Is that right, Amy?
Yeah, I mean, you have globally ranked universities, great education. So Australia's always been a destination for students to study at. So you definitely have great universities in Australia.
Okay. Personally, I have studied in Australia. I'm an Australian citizen, and I've studied at 2 different universities in Australia. And going to university for me was more about having fun on campus and fun off campus. So some people might be coming to Australia just for the cultural point of view, just to enjoy our way of life and our culture. Do you get that a lot when you talk to people?
Yeah, I mean, the quality of life in Australia is great, and it's very similar to the South African culture. You know, might not play rugby as good as us, but
Hey,
you still yeah, spoken like a true South African.
that
Um,
didn't take long.
didn't
Okay.
take long, no. The quality of life is still great, and it's very similar. I mean, we have the same kind of weather, so it's great because you're not only choosing a university, also choosing a country. So that's something to keep in mind when you're thinking about studying overseas.
Yeah, for sure. It's true. We share a lot of cultural nuances, which are very similar. We do both play rugby. We both play cricket. And whilst you braai, we barbecue, but they're all quite similar still. So I think coming to Australia and enjoying our culture and the fun times on and off campuses, probably a good reason to come and study in Australia. Obtaining relevant work experience whilst you're in Australia. There's lots of jobs in Australia at the moment. Our unemployment rate is running at 3.8%, I think, which means that there's a lot of jobs here at the moment. And then finally, getting permanent residency and Australian citizenship. Look, as a registered migration agent, I'm always focused on the end game, and that is how people might go from a student visa, a temporary visa, to a permanent visa. And I'd be interested to know, Amy, when you talk to your clientele, when they inquire through your office as to coming to Australia, how many people are thinking about the long game? How many people are thinking about trying to stay in Australia?
I mean, I think most of the students, especially for Australia, are thinking about the long game. It's their goal is to immigrate later on to Australia. It's not necessarily that they're just trying to internationalize their degrees and then coming back to South Africa or going back to their country of origin. It's more they're looking at immigrating, so they're definitely thinking of those long-term goals. And luckily today we're covering those long-term goals, so the students can see how the process actually works.
Yeah, for sure. Studying in Australia is not cheap. Let's be honest, it's expensive.
No,
So
it's
if you're
not.
coming all this way to spend all this money, in my opinion, you'd want to try and achieve something at the end of the day, which is more than just a great education, and that's hopefully a great job and perhaps permanent residency. Someone's asked in the chat box if this seminar is only for people who want to study in Australia. Will we be talking about visa sponsorship and other points-based visas? I'm going to touch on points-based visas. I'm going to touch on employer sponsorship, but the focus of this webinar is about studying in Australia. We have done webinars in the past which were focused on visa sponsorship and the general skilled point system, and those webinars are available to watch on YouTube.
So I just see another question coming in. So you're asking, I think if there's any specific questions about specific programs, you're more than welcome to pop me an email. My email address will be at the end of the webinar. We just want to keep the questions quite broad so they can be relevant to everyone, but you're more than welcome to pop me an email and I'll be able to answer your question.
For sure. So you want to study in Australia, and then I hope you want to stay permanently in Australia. So how do we do this? My advice to people who are looking to study in Australia and then who want to remain here in Australia is to have a strategy, to have a think about what it is they're trying to achieve, and then how they're going to achieve it. Some really good advice, and to me it seems quite logical, is to choose the right industry, choose the right occupation to study. Not all occupations are equal in the road to permanent residence, and that just is based purely off the fact that some occupations in Australia are in very high demand. and therefore rate very highly on our points skilled system. And if you graduate from a university in Australia as a registered nurse, the chances are that you're going to find employment very quickly, and chances are that you're going to find yourself a pathway to permanent residency as compared with if you were to graduate with a master's in marketing. Look, it's going to be a very good qualification and you might find employment opportunities. Finding a pathway to permanent residency probably is not going to be as easy, and that's based purely off the fact that those occupations are on different skilled lists. So have a think about what you're studying, have a think about the industry that you're looking to pursue a career in. I guess though, at the end of the day, you have to study something that you've got some affinity with and that you can see yourself working in a career for a reasonable period of time. It's no good spending a lot of money on a qualification that you hate the industry. Like, no good studying nursing if you can't stand the sight of blood, right?
Yeah, and I think it's also important you've got to play to your strengths. If science subjects weren't necessarily your strengths, maybe nursing's not for you. So just
Yeah.
play to your strengths. You also, as you say, you need to enjoy what you do. Everyone says those are the main two things when choosing a program. Play to your strengths and enjoy what you do. So those are definitely important.
Yeah, that's really good advice too. And the other thing is that our skilled occupation lists do change all the time.
Yes.
Um, and look, as I said, I've been in the industry for a long time. 10 or more years ago, every accountant who studied in Australia became a permanent resident very quickly thereafter because accountants were in very high demand. And then a strange thing happened. We turned out we had too many accountants, and to obtain permanent residency as an accountant in Australia wasn't so easy. So whilst you might choose an occupation and an industry because it is in high demand, it doesn't mean that it always will be in the future. So it's wise to have chosen something that you do have an affinity with. Play to your strengths. It's good advice, Amy. Choose the university which offers you the best post-study visa options. So if there's different universities in Australia that offer courses which are similar, and again, nursing or engineering is an easy example, then maybe have a look at other universities outside of the large capital cities, which might offer you more benefits when you're looking to apply for other visas in the future. I'm talking specifically about regional universities, and some regional areas, having studied in a regional area will give you greater benefits when looking to apply for other visas in the future. Get some work experience before you come to Australia is a really good piece of advice. If you do come to Australia and study your first tertiary qualification and you walk out of that tertiary qualification and then expect to walk straight into a highly skilled graduate position, then the competition for that position is going to be very high. Whereas if you come to Australia with some work experience already, the likelihood is that you'll find a job more easily in your industry and in your occupation.
Should we have a chat about what are regional areas and the differences between regional?
Yeah,
Yeah, so I think maybe Sam
really good.
can give some light on this. Yeah, it's a good question because not a lot of people know.
It's a really good question, and often when I talk to my clients about what a regional area is, and when I advise them to consider studying or living and working in a regional area, they say to me, Sam, we don't want to live in the outback. We don't like spiders and we don't like the snakes and we're scared of the crocodiles, and the outback's not for us. And I have to explain to people that there's a big difference between the outback and regional areas, because yes, the outback is a regional area, but so is the Sunshine Coast, and so is a lot of other really highly populated areas of Australia which are just outside the capital cities. So basically you can think of Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, our three largest cities, as metropolitan areas. And then essentially everything outside of those three metropolitan areas is considered a regional area. So from where I'm sitting right now, basically in the middle of Melbourne, you could travel as little as, say, 80 kilometres in any direction, and you would be considered to be in a regional area. So you're not that far from Melbourne, and you could still be studying at a really good regional university. So areas like the whole of Tasmania, the whole of South Australia, the whole of Western Australia are considered to be regional. So you could be studying in Hobart, you could be studying in Adelaide, you could be studying in Perth. These are the capital cities of those particular states. So they're big cities still, with really good universities. They're certainly not the outback. They're not the Great Sandy Desert. And the good thing about studying in a regional area is that the cost of living is often a lot less than Sydney and Melbourne. The university themselves are more affordable. The universities are sometimes a little bit smaller, which I think is sometimes an advantage. They're easier to navigate, easier to find your faculty and find your way around your faculty and sort of become familiar with the university. It's easier to find yourself short-term accommodation sometimes in a regional area. So I think there's a lot of advantages in studying in a regional area. Amy, do you get questions about the regions of Australia, and do people ask you as to whether or not studying in Adelaide's like being in the outback?
I mean, I think, as you said, I think there's a misconception that regional is just the outback. And I think people are starting to realize that you have actually a variety of choices between universities. And because as an international student, I mean, it's expensive. It can be very costly being an international student. And as you say, you are offered programs that are more cost effective, the living expenses are lower. So as an international student, this is something or an opportunity that you should jump at, because there are so many benefits, and it's not only has to do with studying, it also has to do with your visas later on. So there is a lot of benefits to studying in regional areas, and I think students are becoming more and more aware of this.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Study a master's degree. So for those of you who are straight out of school, or for those of you who are considering perhaps studying in your home country and then coming to Australia to do a master's degree, I think that's a really good strategy to consider also. So stay in your home country, do a bachelor's degree in an industry that you have an affinity for, play to your strengths, as Amy says. And after you qualify, then maybe get some work experience at home, and then come to Australia and study a master's degree. And the reason that this is a good strategy is, first of all, a master's degree is going to take you perhaps 2 years, whereas your undergraduate degree could take you 3 or 4 years, depending on what you're studying. So it's going to be more affordable to study at a master's level, and you still get the post-study work options and benefits that you ordinarily would when studying an undergraduate degree. The chances are you're a little bit older, a little bit more mature, a little bit more work experience, and probably more likely then to find that next job, which is going to boost your visa prospects into other visa options. So a master's degree, do your clients talk to you about studying master's degrees, or most of them looking at doing undergraduate degrees, Amy?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of students that come and ask the quite important question: do I pursue an undergrad in my country of origin, or do I pursue an undergrad overseas and kind of finish my entire studying time overseas? And a lot of students would rather opt to complete their undergrad back at home and then pursue a postgrad, purely because I mean, it's a lot more cost effective. Also, I think there's a little bit of a misconception that a lot of international universities don't recognize, say, for instance, if you're South Africa, our local universities, they do. We have a lot of students, actually, most of our students are postgrad students. And as you
Yeah.
say, it's 2 years compared to 3 to 4 years. So it definitely is something to consider, and we do recommend it.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a good linkage between people's undergraduate degrees and then leading into master's degrees. So I've seen a lot of my clientele who perhaps have studied a law degree overseas and then come to Australia and done a master's degree in law here in Australia. And obviously, when you're doing subjects like law can be quite specific to the country that you're studying in. So in order to qualify as a solicitor or a lawyer here in Australia, you need to have studied certain qualifications or
Yes.
certain courses in Australia. So even, for example, if you've done your undergraduate overseas and you've done your master's degree overseas and you're a qualified solicitor overseas, you would still need to come to Australia and study in Australia to complete certain subjects in Australia in order to then qualify as a lawyer in Australia. So it makes way more sense. Do your undergraduate in law, come to Australia and do a master's in law, and then you'll go into a post-study work visa option after that.
Exactly.
Yeah, teaching is another good example of people do an undergraduate degree in their home country, and you can do an undergraduate degree basically in anything, and then come to Australia and study masters, a teaching masters course, and then go straight into teaching. So that's another good example of how undergrads and masters degrees link up really well.
Yeah, we have a question here for aerospace or mechanical engineering. We actually have a little case study at the end that speaks of engineering, so maybe Sam can give some more.
Yeah, for sure. So the question is whether or not aerospace or mechanical engineering occupations or industries that are easier to get permanent residency from. So mechanical engineering is on the medium to long-term skilled list. So that's the list that you want to be on. So definitely if you were studying in engineering, mechanical engineering, then you've got a good chance of finding yourself a pathway to permanent residency. Generally speaking, most engineering qualifications here in Australia are in demand at the moment. People are asking about data analytics. So IT at the moment in Australia is highly in demand. So developer programmers, software engineers, ICT business analysts, they are all in high demand. Cybersecurity is a really hot topic at the moment. So these are occupations that if you, again, have some work experience in, have perhaps an undergraduate in, come here, study a master's in, the likelihood that you'll progress into a good job and into a permanent visa option is very likely. And then finally, final dot point on my list of things to do is start working in your industry as soon as you arrive in Australia. Get some Australian work experience, get your foot in the door. You might take a step backwards. You might have to work in a job that you think, oh, look, I'm more highly skilled than this. I was doing this a couple of years ago in my home country, but honestly, it's a foot in the door. It's work experience in Australia, which will often open other doors for you.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, the student visa allows you to have work experience or to work part-time. So, I mean, you can intern at a company that's within your field of study, start building your CV, start kind of contributing to your CV, because that puts you above other job applicants. So it's definitely important, and it's something that you should take advantage of.
100%. Yeah. We've got a question here. My wife wants to study masters in Australia. Can I and the children come with her? Yes, you can, absolutely. And you can work full-time if you choose to as the dependent family member of someone studying at master's degree. Then the dependent spouse has full-time work rights. It's worth noting that student visas here in Australia, ordinarily student visa holders are allowed to work part-time, which is 20 hours a week or 40 hours a fortnight. At the moment, those rules have been relaxed because of post-COVID. We don't have enough people here in Australia to do what needs to be done. So all student visa holders at the moment are allowed to work full-time here in Australia. Someone's asked if we assist in securing employment in Australia. No, we don't. Unfortunately, we're not a recruitment agency and we don't pair with employment partners in Australia. So finding a job is for yourself. Looks like we've lost Amy at the moment. Something might be up with the connectivity in Cape Town, or perhaps the lights have gone out in Cape Town. Hopefully she'll be back with us soon. Someone's asked if it's not a master's degree but normal bachelor's, my husband's studying, can myself and the kids still join? Absolutely. Absolutely. You can still join. The main visa applicant who is studying at bachelor's degree level can then also have their spouse and their children also obtain dependent visas off the back of those student visas. So that is entirely possible. We'll move on to the next slide and we'll hope that Amy comes back to join us again soon. All right, the 485 post-study work visa option. This is what I refer to as the stepping stone. Sorry, everyone, you just lost me there for a moment as well. That was my fault, hitting the wrong buttons. That's why I need Amy here to hit the buttons for me. Apologies. Alrighty, so the 485 post-study work visa. I'm glad to see someone's put a few smiley face emojis in the chat box. Glad to see I'm providing some laughs. All right, 485 post-study work visa option. So this visa can be granted for anywhere between 2 to 4 years, course dependent, and is the logical next step once you've finished your studies. So the majority of people who come to study in Australia should be aiming to go from their study visa to the post-study work visa subclass 485. The criteria is fairly brief, but I've put it here underneath. You need to be under the age of 50. You need to have finished a CRICOS level degree course in Australia with a minimum of 2 years of study. So that's 92 weeks according to the definition. It's an important concept that people understand, that whilst you can transfer credits from your overseas qualification into your Australian studies, you don't want to transfer too many credits and therefore fall underneath the 2 years of study. We have had examples of people who have come to Australia and studied, finished their qualification, then gone to apply for the post-study work visa, and unfortunately their study component was less than 2 years, and therefore they were refused the visa. So ensure that your study is at least 2 years. You need to apply for the post-study work visa within 6 months of you completing the course. So don't leave it too long, otherwise you will not be eligible. You need to be having suitable health, character, insurance, and English language skills. So that means that you will need to attend a medical examination. You will need to provide police checks. You will not need to have evidence of your health insurance and also evidence of your English language skills. Someone's posted in the chat box, sorry, I came in late. May I ask, how do I apply for studies in Australia and how are the chances of getting the scholarship? So Amy, my colleague who was in the webinar with us, but who for some reason has been booted out and hopefully will be back with us soon, is located in our Cape Town office, and you should contact Amy and talk to Amy about how you apply to study in Australia and also how are the chances of obtaining a scholarship. Our contact details will be at the end of the webinar, and this webinar will also be emailed to all of you at the end. Excuse me. So what's next? Or someone's asked, do we have an office in Nigeria? Yes, we do. Our contact details will be at the end of the webinar also. What's next? How do I become a permanent resident? So this is what you've all been waiting for, yeah? This is the million-dollar question, and I don't have a silver bullet to answer this question with. Everyone's circumstances is unique, and everyone needs bespoke advice based on their particular set of circumstances. So no piece of advice which I give to one person should be used in a generalistic application in order to set out to achieve permanent residency. Everyone should get a set of advice based on their own unique set of circumstances. These are some examples of how people will achieve permanent residency in Australia. There are so many different visa options to talk about. There are so many different pathways, and there's so many different sort of stepping stones from one visa to another that people might take in order to achieve permanent residency. But these are some examples of how people might do that. So on the left, we have general skill migration. These are what are referred to as the points tested visas. So subclass 189, subclass 190, subclass 491. Points tested visas means that you need to score a certain amount of points in order to qualify. You score points in accordance with your age, in accordance with your qualifications and your work experience, with your English language skills. So if you do score enough points and you work in the right occupation, then it might be possible for you to achieve one of those general skilled visas. There's many different types of employer-sponsored visas. So on the right there, 407, 482, 186. Now these all require that you have some work experience in the occupation. So anywhere between 1 to 3 years of work experience in the occupation at the school level is required in order to become sponsored by an employer in Australia. So the key to success is to find work experience in your occupation in Australia. This will lead to more visa options. My advice is to start early, as soon as you get to Australia, as soon as practical, find employment in your industry, in your occupation. Your student visa allows you to work full-time whilst you're in semester break and allows you to work part-time whilst you are within your semester. Find some part-time work experience, and hopefully this will lead to a full-time job at the end of your student visa. Don't waste your time driving an Uber. Often when I'm in an Uber here in Australia, on my way home, I get talking to my Uber driver, and it turns out that they're here on a student visa, and they find out that I am a migration agent, and they want to quiz me on all things regarding their immigration status. So yeah, don't waste your time driving an Uber. Work in your industry, work in your occupation, and try and get yourself some work experience here in Australia. A common question that I field is with regards to work experience and regards to what work experience will count towards skilled work experience for the points tested visas and for employer sponsored visas. The short answer is anything which is post qualified. So if you did, let's say, a civil engineering bachelor's degree in your home country, and then you came to Australia and you were studying a master's degree in civil, and whilst you were studying, you were also working in a part-time capacity, but in civil engineering, because that work experience is post-qualified, and post-qualified being your qualification from home, then that particular work experience does count towards your skilled work experience here in Australia, both for the points tested visas and for any employer sponsored visas. However, if you were in Australia studying your undergraduate degree, so your first qualification in civil engineering, and you were working part-time as a civil engineer or a trainee civil engineer, unfortunately that work experience would not count towards general skilled visas or employer sponsored visas, because the work experience is not post-qualified. So you need to be academically qualified in your industry, in your occupation, before that work experience will count towards skill migration. So I hope that helps. I've just had a note from a colleague to say that Amy's trying to get back in. She was kicked out and she's trying to get back into the webinar. Let's hope she finds her way back in. She looks to be lost in the matrix somewhere. Alrighty, I'm going to talk about some case studies now. These are just some examples of clients of mine and pathways to permanent residency that people have found here in Australia after coming to Australia on a student visa. So Denise came to study a Bachelor of Nursing at Torrens University in Adelaide. After she finished her bachelor's degree, she found a graduate nursing job whilst on her 485 visa. It's worth noting that Denise came to Australia holding I think she had a certificate or a diploma in nursing from her home country, and she had some experience as well. And then she went into her bachelor's degree, then she went to a 485 visa, and she found herself a graduate nursing job. She was then nominated by the state government of South Australia under subclass 190, and she's now a permanent resident of Australia. Subclass 190 is a permanent visa. And the interesting thing about Denise and about this particular case study is that the state of South Australia give you really good incentives and really good benefits to studying in South Australia. So basically they have a policy which says if you come to Australia and you study in South Australia, Amy's back. Hi,
I'm
Amy.
back. I got lost in the matrix. Sorry about that, guys.
Good to see that you're back. So just explaining my case study, Denise, who studied nursing here in Australia, and explaining the policy that the government of South Australia have. Basically, the policy says that if you study in South Australia and then you stay in South Australia and find a job in your industry and you work in that job for at least 6 months, then the state government of South Australia will nominate you for subclass 190. Amy, you might want to mute yourself. We're getting some really bad feedback at your end. Thank you. Alrighty, so Denise is a really good example of how easy it can be to achieve permanent residency in Australia if you choose a particular occupation and if you study in a particular area. It's not going to work for everyone because not everyone wants to study nursing, but it's a good example of how straightforward achieving permanent residency can be for some people. Someone's asked a question. I'm just going to read the question out. Can one apply for a work visa while still on the student visa besides the 485 visa you spoke about? Do you need to complete your student visa first before applying for 189, 190 or 491? No, you don't. You can go straight from your student visa to any other particular type of visa. So you could go from your student visa to 189, 190 or 491. If you're lucky enough to be invited for any of those particular visa types. What I find most commonly is that people need the 485 visa in order to gain more work experience and to gain more time in order to achieve those other visa outcomes like 189, 190 or any other employer sponsored visas. Someone's asked me a question. Do you need to be able to show you can support yourself financially for the full time of your 485 visa? You do need to show that you've got sufficient funds to support yourself, not for the full time of the 485 visa, because obviously 485 visa is a work visa, so you are allowed to work. So the idea is that you will be working and able to earn an income and therefore support yourself on a day-to-day basis. But you do need to show that you've got some money in the bank to support yourself. The government don't want to see that you're destitute. Alrighty, next case study. Johan was a client of mine, studied a master's degree in hydrogeology at the University of Western Australia. This particular client of mine had a related bachelor's degree from Stellenbosch University, and he also had 2 years of work experience from back home as well. Came to Australia, finished his master's in Australia, then moved on to the 485 visa. He'd already worked part-time in Australia while studying, and his employer that he was working with at the time then offered him full-time work. So he went from part-time work with that employer to full-time work. After 12 months of full-time work, his employer offered him sponsorship under a permanent visa, subclass 186, and he is now a permanent resident, as is his wife and his children. So that was a really great visa outcome for those guys. Amy, did you want to add anything? I know I've got you on mute. I'm sorry about that, but you were adding some feedback to my webinar.
No problem. Sorry about that. Am I still adding feedback?
Yeah,
okay,
your audio is not great.
I'm going to have to mute myself, unfortunately.
Sorry about that. So where to from here? Get in touch with us. Get in touch with Amy. Amy's in our Cape Town office. Amy is your first point of contact if you wish to speak to someone about your study options in Australia. What course do I choose? What university do I choose? If you're undecided on any of those particular options, then Amy's your best person to speak to. We also have visa consultants in our Cape Town office who can talk to you about what might provide you more advantages in regards to location of study, course of study, and visa outcomes, how you might be gaining a benefit from studying one course over another if you want to try and achieve a permanent visa outcome in Australia. So our contact details are there. So feel free to send us an email or to give us a call. I apologize. I did tell someone on the webinar today that we do have an office in Nigeria, which we really do. And if you are in Nigeria, then you can contact that office. I'm sorry, it's not displayed on the screen right now, but if you get on our website, then you'll find our contact details for Nigeria. Amy might even be able to put a link in the chat box or contact details in the chat box at the moment. Or just give Amy a call or pop her an email and she'll send you those details, and you can speak locally to our staff in Nigeria. Now, I try and do these webinars in 40 minutes, and I'll be going for exactly 40 minutes. So I'm probably going to wrap up now. If anyone's got any questions, you can quickly shoot an email, or you can shoot a question through now if you like. Someone's asking what your email address is, Amy. You can email Amy at study@sableinternational.com. I think Amy might be replying.
Sorry, everyone, I don't want to ruin your eardrums, so I'm just a bit cautious to unmute myself. But yes, you can pop me an email at study@sableinternational.com, and I will send through your inquiry to our different offices. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining the webinar today, and I'm sorry about the technical issues, but you're more than welcome to pop us emails if you have any specific questions about specific programs you want to study or anything. I'm happy to help.
Thanks for attending, everyone. Please feel free to reach out, get in touch with us. We're happy to answer your questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye now.